Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Jazakallah khair for joining us. Today we have Mujtaba, who's a principal at GSV Ventures. He's much more than that, obviously. He's been in the finance industry for quite some time, has quite a lot of experience, has also um, been a part of publishing and authoring certain topics around Sharia compliance in Islamic finance, in finance. And so we're super excited to have him have a conversation about where he's at, how he sort of um, thinks through his day to day, and what his sort of story is. Jazakallah khair for joining us.
Hey, assalamu alaikum, man. Happy to be here. Where do you want to start?
Man, so tell us what. Okay, we'll start with where you're at right now. Well, you're telling me about being a principal, so tell us more about that. What's that life like?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in venture for about 5 years now. Adventure's a lot of fun. Like it's something I could see myself doing forever. I was in San Diego for a conference that I go to every year that my firm puts on, and I'll just go for like an hour and a half walk with an amazing human being and like talk about 90% stuff that has nothing to do with the business or the company, drinking like an iced coffee on, the Pacific Ocean and like sunny weather. I'm like, this is being a VC. It's a terrific setup in that sense. Overall, I think if you're someone who likes conversation and like I'm not a extrovert. I'm on that whole Myers-Briggs thing. I'm 50-50 extrovert introvert. But I don't I hate big gatherings. I hate schmoozing, etc. But I do really like one-on-one coffees and that kind of thing where I actually get to know someone. So VC is really great in that sense. It's literally a job where you get to meet people and hear about what they care about. So it's a lot of fun.
So your favorite thing is learning about what they care about?
What they care about, their personal stories. I'm way less interested in like their
The numbers.
product screenshots and this and that. I am a numbers guy. I care
But does
compared to a
that
lot
come
of VCs.
after
It
learning
comes
about the
after. It
business?
comes after. I want to know what I really want to know is I want to know your family history. I know what like your I want to know how much you know about your great grandparents, where you were born, what your parents were like, how you grew up. It all trickles into like what kind of founder and entrepreneur you are and what kind of business you want to build and how
But
you
why does that matter though?
you
I
operate.
mean, being at a venture firm, like, you're managing this fund, like, isn't the bottom line what matters? Like, don't you need to make the most
And
money
it
for
it only matters if you think that influences the bottom line. If you don't think it influences the bottom line,
how
and
does it
I've never
influence it?
seen anyone do there's no like HBR study on the different like family heritages of founders and their upbringings and whether or not whether they're a middle child or an oldest child and how that affects the performance of their startup. I'd love to see some data and someone do an analysis of this stuff. That'd be fascinating actually if you took like YC would be a great place to start. Take all their data because they have, thousands of companies over the last 15, 20 years, whatever it is, and map characteristics like age of founder, background, gender, order in siblings, order of like siblings' genders, what their parents did, parents' education levels, their degrees in what, how much schooling, and factor that all into like the performance of their company. I think it'd be super interesting to analyze that data. But
So how
I
do you
think
use
I have
that?
my own biases and trends for
Why
sure.
is that? Like, tell me the
We
thought
For
process.
better or for worse, investing is pattern recognition, and patterns, there's always exceptions to the rule, so it helps and hurts to get too caught up in your own patterns. But I definitely have patterns of founders I really like, and some of the stuff is simple, like I like founders with 2 to 10 years of work experience who've worked both in at like big credible companies, whether that's like big tech or big finance, big consulting, and at startups and small nimble organizations. And ideally that have quote unquote like founder market fit, right? Like it's a team of, if it's an AI accounting startup, it's someone who studied CS at at Stanford, MIT, or Carnegie Mellon or whatever it is, and then worked at Google, and then worked at a fintech startup, and someone who was an accountant and studied finance, at Wharton, etc. And
Yeah.
that's like your ideal team. But then a bunch of stuff is a lot more squishy than that. Some of the most brilliant founders I've worked with are super kind of like spacey numbers guys. Like when I meet them in person, hang out with them, they'll get like distracted by a room and start like calculating like how many people can fit in that room or something. Like it's really interesting little like personal
Yeah,
patterns.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely I have a personal theory that the best founders either talk super fast, you can't keep track of what they're saying, just they're like
The brain's just
they're just like
rolling.
rolling, 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 or it's the opposite. They take long pauses or clearly super methodical in what they're saying, how they're thinking. At least that's been my observation. On one end of the spectrum, they're not. You know that I love. I feel like I could explain 80% of the things I see and do in that bell curve meme. You know what I'm talking about with
Yeah,
like the dumb person on this side, the smart person on this side, and like regular people. That's how I feel about talking speed of founders.
that's so funny. Now, I mean, you named a bunch of stuff that helps you make a decision as young Muslim men, and I think I'll preface this question with, I think Islam, one of the great things, one of the beautiful things about Islam is that the way that it's taught and the way that it's sort of structured is that it allows for me, it helps guide like every part of my life, right? Everything from personal relationships to business relationships to how to treat people to breaking down my day into five based on the prayers, etc., right? And finding balance, all that stuff. I think the way that the Prophet ﷺ taught it was through his actions and through his personality, and what kind of person he was, and like the personality traits that everyone spoke about, even the non-Muslims, right? And so knowing that about our religion, and being a young Muslim trying to find his way in today's world, if you could answer that same question about a founder's qualities in the form of like personality traits that are also taught in
Hmm.
our deen,
Like,
like
yeah, that's
what
it.
would they
Yeah.
be?
Yeah, I don't know, not to take us into a tangent, but I don't know if you've met the Forerunners guys. So
Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
couple
yeah.
guys in this area, Awais Sheikh, Uthman al-Talib, etc., who are like their whole thing is like they want to, map these qualities, sort of prophetic qualities or anecdotes from the Sirah and how they can, make you a better leader, better employee, whatever it is in the workforce. One that immediately comes to mind is like transparency and honesty.
Mm.
In venture is a smoke and mirrors business, right? It's mostly hype. It's about creating FOMO. It's about selling something you haven't built yet, right? There's a lot of stuff in venture that seems borderline on ethics and morality. Definitely founders exaggerate like what they have done or what they're going to do or where they're at or the stage of their product or their numbers. And part of an investor's job is to peel back where are you actually versus where are you saying you are. And I think it's super important, especially if you have a long term mindset. If your mindset is just trying to get someone to commit, say yes, sign the term sheet, send a term sheet immediately today, tomorrow, this week, then sure, like that's the way to do it. But if you want to build a 5, 10, 15-year relationship with an investor, being transparent and honest with them really goes a long way. An example I always give is, look, if in fundraising you tell us X about your numbers, and then in diligence we realize it's actually Y, and then after we close and the deal is done, we realize it's really Z. Like it's changed in layers, and obviously for the worse. Of course, for the worse. We're starting a relationship on a bad foot, and now that we're investors in your company, I already kind of don't trust you or think you're selling me too hard in the fundraise process. And as we map our relationship for the next, I think the data says the fun fact is the average venture relationship between an investor and a startup is longer than the average marriage, at least in the United States. Uh, that's that just it creates an unhealthy dynamic where I don't trust you.
Yeah.
And the best thing you can do is be transparent. We love to ask founders as they're fundraising, like, what are the big challenges? What keeps the question is what keeps you up at night? Like, what's going to be the difficulties in the next year, 2 years, 3 years? And if I know them and you tell me upfront, transparently what they are, when they come, I'm not going to be shocked, right? I'm not going to be rubbed the wrong way. I'll know what to expect. I'll know if there's something I can do to help you with that or not. And this really especially matters when things go south. Companies, of course, hopefully it's straight up to the right, but even if it's straight up to the right, it's going to be with some bumps along the road, in the business cycle. And you might need a cash infusion. Like that's the most obvious place, right? You might need a bridge round. If you've been dishonest, exaggerating, I don't trust you, you're not getting that bridge round from us. It's not happening. But if you were transparent about the problems from day one, you've always been honest, you might not necessarily have taken our advice, but like you clearly considered and listened to our advice, we're way more likely to trust you to, put another $1 million up or whatever it is, because we've seen that you're a good partner to work with.
Yeah. So that transparency and honesty.
And it cuts the other way. And not to just sort of go deeper and deeper into this, but
Please do.
the FOMO factor, right? Like founders are coached to create FOMO. That's a fast way to close around, fast way to get people excited. I can distinctly remember multiple times founders who in the fundraising process were super annoying and difficult to work with. Just sort of very diva-esque attitudes, because they were hot per se at that moment, right? Everyone wanted to meet them. The round was oversubscribed, all that good stuff. And fast forward a year, 2 years, company's not going that well. It's going okay. And now they're reaching out to me asking for an introduction, some other kind of favor or help. And it's like, I could and would do those things for you, but you were really difficult 12, 18 months ago. If you had been nice, normal, I would do those things for you without blinking. But now, like, why? I'm not going to go out of my way to help you when went out of your way to be a problematic person to work with.
Yeah.
So I guess that's, I think, an kind of obvious one from sort of the prophetic tradition.
Yeah. Uh, I'm not saying to, you know, I'm not saying like this has anything to do with your company or anything of that sort, but maybe speak on it more generally. Like, have you ever witnessed a situation where, I mean, there's a power dynamic, right? As the investor, there is a power dynamic to a certain degree where you have the money and maybe the founder really needs it. Have you ever witnessed a situation where you don't have to be on that side, but on the investor side, you've noticed someone take advantage of that power dynamic? And then as a result, like, have you had an opportunity to maybe stop it or be like, yo, man, this is wrong, or step away from it? Or have you witnessed a situation like that ever?
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
Basically, where your ethics and values are challenged.
Yeah, the question is, it becomes really like gray. What is wrong, right? So like going back to what we were talking about, companies struggling. They need a bridge round. What generally happens, the worse the situation is the terms just get more and more in favor of the investors. Whether that's instead of 1x lick pref, it's 2x, it's 3x. I've seen 10x floated before.
Man.
And someone might say like, that's wrong. That's quote unquote predatory, unfair. You're taking advantage of the company. I mean, it's a matter of perspective. Like if I'm in the investor seat and I have been in that investor seat, it's like this company has a like 50% chance of going bankrupt in the next month. If you want me to put in more money, there needs to be imbalanced reward on the other side for the imbalanced risk I'm taking on by putting more money in. So, like, these things are complicated. I think we like to get sort of caught up in this idea that, like, we need to be really founder friendly or that investors are bad guys. And it absolutely can be true. Like, it can be true. People can put in term sheets that founders are first time founders. They don't understand what participating preferred is or what terms they took, and they
Mm,
just took it because they liked them. And I think that's, you know, messed up to have people sign on and accept terms they don't understand. But then stuff like this, we're talking about bridge rounds and different levels of pref. Like, it's really hard to say that it's right or wrong as much as it's a matter of which side of the table you're on, and things can get very dicey very quickly, right? I remember, to take us in a whole different direction, like student boycotts, right? So
mm-hmm.
obviously now a lot of stuff is about like Palestine, BDS, sanctions, da 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 da. But I remember an issue for a while. I went to Yale. Was Yale students were occupying the investments office, like building lobby, saying we want you to divest from sovereign debt. And the way this works, students don't really know what they're talking about, right? The endowment will be invested in a credit manager, a debt manager, who will buy sovereign bonds of a country.
Okay.
And so it's not like the endowment is buying Argentina's bonds. They're invested in a credit manager who thinks there's good risk reward in like the bonds of Argentina, so they're buying the bonds. I mean, like you can stake out and complain that you don't like it or you think it's unethical. That's fine, but it's really a lot more complicated than that. And the endowment can't necessarily even do anything about it. If they're invested in, they have a legal obligation, they've funded, the manager's allowed to do whatever they want. Do you want them to break their, what we call fiduciary duty and like sell at a loss in order to correct what a student may perceive as unethical. So not to get like too murky in too many different directions, things can get quite gray. It's very rarely like super obvious that, oh, we're doing like it's not like we're payday lenders, like, right?
Yeah.
It's in the venture capital industry.
Yeah. I think I hear you. I hear you. And I think that there's a lot of merit to that for sure. When you say things get murky and things get gray, I mean things are gray. I agree with that, and most people would, right? It's not all sunshine and flowers and the other extreme, right? Like there's definitely a middle. I think what's very important is being firm in your values, firm in what you stand on, and then standing on it, right? Like what you're saying about breaking your fiduciary duty. Okay, like maybe in that scenario, it's not it's not something that crosses that line for you. But in another, like, I think that us as young Muslims in these industries where it's it's important that we have those values, that we have those outlined ethics, that you know what, like if this were to cross this line, I'm either gonna fix it or like I can't be a part of this situation. And so, you know, I agree that like in a lot of business, like if you have measured risk a certain way, like for example, the example that you were giving about the bridge round, and there's a 50% chance that this company is going to go bankrupt, like you've measured that risk. And based on the measurement of that risk, you have provided a offer. And now it's up to the business owner's discretion to accept that offer or not, right? Like we've been in situations, or I've been in situations where it seems nice. The offer seems nice, but the details, like, the fine print and everything is not it. So the offer gets rejected and you sort of struggle for the next 6 months or whatever the case might be. Right. So I think with that transparency and whatnot, I believe that, business is business. But if there was wrong being done, I definitely think there's something to be said about having these values and standing on them, right? And that's for that next generation and what we're teaching them and sort of what we're influencing. So I agree with it, but finding that balance isn't easy, right? Like finding that balance
Yeah.
between business and that is not easy, but I pray that we all get better over time. Even when you do make a mistake, I think that it becomes about, okay, did I learn from it and what would I do next time, right?
Yeah.
And so,
I think it's important. I think it's important what you're saying. I think it's important to have like baseline
yeah.
lines, right? Like that you're quote unquote not going to lie. But
Yes.
then we get into like what is lying? Is exaggerating lying? Like if you're a founder or you're VC raising money from LPs, or I've definitely seen what happens is, when an early stage venture capital firm invests in a company, they'll go and introduce that company for the next round to, mid stage VCs. And they will also oversell how the company is doing. And like, are they lying? Things get murky on, where do you draw the line? And there's little personal examples, like your personal life or your, the hours and the industry and that kind of stuff. The stuff like, do you go to a happy hour or not? Like these kind of things. When I was like a first year analyst, just, working a lot and in the office all the time, I would ask one of my teachers and he would say, look, as long as you're not drinking, he's like, are you like praying your 5 prayers on time? And are you doing your word? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, then you're fine. Like,
Yeah.
you're good. As
No,
long as you don't like those are the lines. Like if you're doing those things, you're good.
yeah.
But somebody else's lines may be somewhere else, just
Yeah.
depends
That's a
what's
good
your
point.
minimum.
That's a good point. Like I was talking to a friend of mine. He's a director at one of the hospitals, and he went to Palestine for 5 weeks as an emerge doctor.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to him, and he's very outspoken. So my question to him was, bro, like, is this what you would advise to anyone? Like, you're where you're at, you're not worried about your job, you're not worried about XYZ. Like, he's like, no, man, like if you were a first year resident doctor, I wouldn't say do the same thing. Like that doesn't make any sense, right? Your
Yeah. Yeah.
livelihood's at stake at that point. And so
I
it's
mean,
being
respect
strategic about it.
respect the people who want to put their livelihood on the line, right? If you're willing to take that risk, like bless you, like that's your
Yeah.
prerogative, right? I mean, this is a weird example. Um, when Snowden happened, sort of the leaks, the expose, the whistleblowing, if you will, and he's like floating, in Russia and like the airport. I'm like, I'm glad he did the leaks personally. I think it's super useful and interesting information that the public should know. I also think like, of course, he's what happened to him is going to happen. Like, you just did a massive security leak against the United States government, and you're like a Russian airport. Of course, they're going to go after you. Like, people getting mad at the government. I mean, like he broke the law in a way that was in the public interest, but there are consequences for that. And so, yeah, if you're a, first year analyst and you want to become like a political activist, it's probably not going to work out for you in your career.
Yeah.
And like that's a choice you have to make.
But that's where, like, I also think that that's where our deen comes in, right? Like, my trust in Allah that my risk is written, right? And so if I'm not getting it this way, I'm getting it another way. And again, this goes back to like having that foundation, and that could, like you said, like it could change a little bit over time in terms of what it is that your needs are as a person based off of what stage in life you're at. But the foundation stays the same, right? The foundation stays the same. And remembering that risk is written from Allah, like remembering that our ultimate goal is Jannah. So anything that's sort of putting that at risk, don't act on it. But I think, like, I want to ask you more about what you said, like, for you to be able to make those decisions and sort of navigate where you were at. Talk to us about your journey in, because I mean, you've been in the finance world, right? You've been in the finance world. You went to a prestigious university. There's a lot of different kinds of challenges along the way, right? That will challenge those values of yours. And so, how did you navigate that? Who did you lean on? You mentioned some teachers. Was there a certain point that you could have went left, but you're like, you know what, this is the path that I'm on? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's uh it's a long journey, right? Like things change slowly over time. Uh, I definitely things changed a lot from where I entered college and left college and when I started working and where I am on that today. I think not to be too going like I'm trying to decide what direction to take this, but look, I think I'm definitely a huge proponent of having a great peer group, right? Like trying to find the right guys or gals who are better than you in some way, right? Who will like help be your guides, your mentors, right? And so, the easiest thing, of course, if you're an undergrad, is like who are the upperclassmen, right? Like who've already done this, who've already done the internship or found it, who've already navigated, how to network or socialize or whatever it is on the path that you're pursuing interested in, or even to shape like what path you're on. I mean, my entire career is kind of like a accidental happenstance through like random Muslim people helping me out. Growing up, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. My dad's a lawyer. My mom was a lawyer at one point. Uh, I grew up in the DC area. Government law, politics was everything. I had an interest in investing. I'd done some trading and buying public equities in high school. I made a friend when I was an undergrad who was a law school student. He knew someone in the private equity world who he introduced me to. That guy helped me get an internship, and sort of that journey continues on. Like the group we worked in private equity has had five, six, maybe seven Muslim guys come through over the years because of basically like a son of almost of like guys bringing in other guys and guys moving
Yeah.
on, and just like a continuous chain. So yeah, I mean, I was once having lunch on this beautiful farm in California with a really nice group of Muslim humans, and this one woman asked me like, "What are you very grateful for?" I told her I'm very, very grateful for the people Allah has like put in my life, like people just come out of nowhere like when
Yeah.
you need them, and so whether that's a university chaplain, a professional mentor, a friend, like whatever it is, they've always come out of somewhere for me.
No, that's amazing, man. I think it's such a big blessing. It's such a big blessing, right? Like, what's the hadith on good company?
Yeah.
I think
It's
there's
not
a
it's not
hadith
not
on
a
like,
hadith, but yeah, no, there absolutely is. But this is like standard Twitter advice, right? Like
yeah,
you are your friends, you are the company you
yeah,
keep.
yeah.
I remember in
Average
high
of the five
school,
people.
yeah, your average is the five people you spend the most time with. I remember in high school, they brought in some assembly speaker to talk to like the graduating seniors before going off to college. And I still remember he basically said, "Look, if you hang out with the potheads, you're going to become a pothead. If you hang out with the nerds, you're going to get straight A's."
Yeah.
And I still remember that. Like he's right. It's really that simple.
Yeah. I think it was if you hang out with a blacksmith, you'll come out smelling like him, whereas if you hang out with someone who owns a perfume shop, you'll come out smelling like that.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I forget the exact words on it, but exactly what you said. And I think that that's super important, right? Like even at the time of the prophet, right? When he was spreading the deen, like a lot of the a lot of the new Muslims had family that were non-Muslims or people that they were close to, etc. Like they could have spent their time with them after they converted, right? I mean, not counting the fact that they had to go to Medina and stuff. Um, they could have, but there's a reason why you then start to surround yourself with people with more knowledge, people with better character, and
yeah,
all that stuff, because that's what'll sort of get you to that ultimate goal, you know. So I appreciate that. I think
yeah.
that that's a good reminder for sure.
And I want to throw in one more point there though. And I like still find myself navigating this of I believe in that. And that's what I try to do for myself, right? Hang out with folks that are better than me, people that will benefit me. At the same time, I want to be a good influence for the people who I already knew, if that makes sense. And so, I have a couple of friends who I knew in elementary and high school who've converted. And I mean, like, if I had stopped spending time with them, or like, I don't know if they would have become Muslim, right? And so there's this balance of I want to spend time with people who benefit me, but I want to share how I've benefited with people who have not accessed that yet.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's like a yeah. I tell my wife all the time. We talk about it all the time about how Islam is like beautiful in the sense where it talks about both sides of the relationship, both sides of the coin, and it talks about how some in some ways like you'll be this, in some ways you'll be that, right? Like our responsibility to our parents as well as our responsibility to our children, you know. So in some moments you're a parent, other moments you're a child. Like what you got to know both sides and you got to do both sides, and it's like yes, I need to go find good people for myself. I also need to be a good person for people.
Yeah, I find it super interesting to map. Like I just noticed my wife do this yesterday. My little sister absolutely does this, where how they talk in general is significantly different than how they talk when they're t when they talk to their parents or grandparents. So like my little sister talks way more like a kid when she comes home and is like spending time with like her siblings and her parents.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You just see sort of like it change.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's funny. That's a good point. Man, amazing. So talk to me. You have, I'm just going to look this up so I don't get it wrong. You have authored a chapter on Sharia and shared ownership, as well as there's a paper on Sharia compliance and sustainability,
Yeah, yeah. So
right?
basically, I took a class in I think it was my sophomore year of college, with a professor who basically focused on let's call it alternative investing, ethical investing, responsible investing, impact investing, sustainable, all this stuff. That was his area of research, what he's interested in. And most of these products I did with him, he basically loved to shepherd his students into research, into turning their class papers into published papers, compiling them into books and the such. And so that's really where I really quote unquote like learned about like what is Islamic finance. What are the rules? What are the stipulations? What are the contract names and technical terms? And it was a good period of learning the basics, if you will. But and I guess in a formal sense, I've never worked in Islamic finance, right? That
Yeah, yeah,
was
yeah. That's I know that.
research I did as a 19 or 20-year old a decade ago.
So what's if you could sum it up, like what is if you could sum it up or simplify it, like what is that to you? Like what did you as a 19, 20-year-old, what was it? Like here are the three things that make it what it is, or here are the three things that it sort of sits on. Like what is that for you if you could summarize it for the people?
Yeah, I think there's a first principles or more philosophical answer, and then there's a more technical answer, right? I think the first principles philosophical answer, which I actually think, in my opinion, aligns very well with like capitalism per se, is this language that Kerry Krasinski, that professor uses. He likes these terms of shared ownership, shared economy. I think that is the baseline principle of quote unquote Islamic finance, which is shared risk, aligned interests, fairness, right? Like it's a very simple, basic concept and principle in a way of looking at things. Now, going back to our earlier discussion, like that can mean different things to different people depending on who you are in the equation and where you're standing. And it pushes back against things like overly structuring, over financializing an economy in such ways that like risk is all broken up and segregated. But I think that's the basic principle, right? Like the reason that we can talk about like interest and riba and different opinions on what is what and how to interact with that or not interact with that. But the core example and obvious example given is always like the I forget the exact translation, but like it compounds against someone, against the borrower, right? And so the easy example is like a payday loan that with a 300% rate or something is clearly non-shared risk and really, to use polite language, hurting one party
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
at the benefit of another party. That to me is like the core of what is like what should be taken away and adopted and can be used outside of like the Islamic finance profession per se or the more formal sector. And then of course you can get into a lot more technical stuff on
No, I think that that's a great.
debt ratios and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
this other
yeah, yeah,
stuff.
yeah. No, I definitely
Yeah,
think that that's a great start and like a great sort of summary of it because like everybody is not equipped to do the in-depth research about each sort of facet of Islam. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
And they don't need to,
Yeah,
right?
and you don't need
You
to.
don't
Yeah,
need
yeah,
to.
yeah.
You don't need to understand the difference between musharaka and mudaraba, and
Yeah.
you
But I
can
think like
ask
at the
someone, "Can I get
core,
a credit card to open a bank account or not?" You don't really need to, do the research.
I think like at the core, if you're able to understand the different transactions and the contracts and what makes it halal based off of these core principles, it makes life a lot easier. It makes a life a lot easier, and you have scholars in place, you have companies in place that are building the products to inshallah allow for you to operate within those means without thinking. There's definitely an aspect of thinking in the current like traditional products that exist, but understanding that core is definitely the first step because then you're able to go into your day to day, even just outside of your work, right? Like we're talking about working in Islamic finance or not, but even outside of that, it's like a contract or a business agreement with someone else on some sort of project that we're pursuing. A family member or a close friend is needing to borrow money or is starting a
Yeah.
business or is whatever, right? Like
Yeah,
understanding what
there's
that might look like.
I'll give you two or three really specific examples to make that real for people. I took a class in college called Life Worth Living, where basically every week you'd cover different religious or philosophical traditions. So the major religions and a bunch of other stuff like utilitarianism. And when we talk about interest, an example given in the class that I really liked was, let's say your friend needs to borrow $100 from you. Would you in the first place, if your friend needed to borrow $100 from you, would you ask your friend for the money back? Like, I wouldn't. I don't need $100. Alhamdulillah,
That'd
like
be hard to do.
$100 doesn't really mean much to me. Like I really don't need $100. Somebody asks me for $100, I know they can have it. Like,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I don't need it. If I was to ask for $100 back for whatever reason, would I ask for $100 plus $5
No,
back?
no chance.
Like, no, no way. Like, I'm not asking for money back on top of it, right? And I thought that was a really interesting example to like, contextualize your principle into real life. Two other small ones for like what we interact with, what we'll see in our own lives is at least it's slightly different in Canada, but like at least in the US, right? Doctors, dentists have a lot of discretion on like what you prescribe, what procedures you tell people to do, and how much money you make. And I mean, I can say personally from where I live and where I've interacted with a lot of Muslim doctors here are highly unethical, in my opinion. Like what they're doing is really messed up. Like they are encouraging people, they're basically overcharging, overprescribing. They might not think what they're doing is haram or like against like their religious financial principles, but like you're selling people stuff they don't need and like sort of encouraging them or hard selling them into services because you make money from it. But it's not right. And I would say like, that whole halal risk income, what you eat, what your du'as, prayers are accepted, etc. Like I don't know if that works counts for like these practices. And then the last one that I'm thinking of is I think it's a hadith about that you should pay, someone who's working for you before like the sweat dries
Mm.
from their labor. I mean, think about like how we get paid and we pay, right? Like 2 week cycles at the end of the project, deposit this, that. Like that's not how we do business, right? If I hire a contractor to come remodel my kitchen or something, like I don't pay him every day like the physical guy doing the work after he's done sweating. I pay like his company when the product is done, right? And fight with them about a bunch of stuff in the process. So yeah, you can make this stuff really real if you want to. It doesn't have to be about interest rates and your home mortgage and like your credit card and blah blah blah.
No, I agree, man. I 100% agree with that because not everyone's there, and then it becomes about, oh, like I'm not buying a home, so this doesn't really apply to me. Some of the examples that you gave, like it could apply to you on a day to day, which I 100% agree with, man. And I appreciate that reminder. And so in the world that you're in, right? So if we were to bring it all back, right? And in the world that you're in, like you are ultimately in the finance world, right? Like you are ultimately dealing with that on a day-to-day basis, and you've been exposed. I think that you said that your first exposure to Islamic finance and what it means um, was in your university days. If you like, what is your sort of journey like now, going into the future? Maybe what is your present time like where you're able to apply now? Specifically, I'm asking, we've talked
Yeah.
about other parts of Islam and other parts of the deen and things that you can apply, but are there ways that you're specifically applying these principles, or are there projects, things that you're looking forward to in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
future?
yeah. So I guess a few different things. At the moment, like I don't expect myself to ever be quote unquote like a Islamic finance professional, right? Like I don't think I'm gonna go build a Munzel or join a company like that. Uh, but I have connectivity and involvement and apply it to things, and we'll continue to do so. There's a bunch of products I'm really interested in pursuing. Hopefully one day with time and energy. So I guess a few examples is I know you guys recorded a session with Saad Malik.
Yeah.
So I was actually just texting him. But, I was introduced to Saad, and I both spent. Saad still lives there, but I spent some time living in Princeton, New Jersey. We both know this great guy, Dr. Amir Rahman, who you all should definitely have on the podcast, who invests his own money out of an organization called Innate Capital Partners. He's basically a former private equity guy, now a professor at Columbia Business School, and so I try to stay involved by angel investing in and reviewing and just being engaged with the ecosystem. So through Dr. Amir's investments and guys like Saad, like, I've interacted with and worked with Zoya, Munzil, Wahid, the Yielders, some other more problematic companies I won't mention, finance, like a bunch of people building in and around the space. This Stern Salam's bank guy, Zishan Gondal was 2 years younger than me at Yale. We were in L1 Arabic together, and like now he's running like the only basically commercial Sharia compliant like banking practice in the United States. So I try to stay involved, stay plugged in. I do a lot of personal real estate investing, and have started to do so with more family and friends, and that's all 100% cash, like Sharia compliant, like no leverage. We've looked into Sharia compliant leverage, but I've basically decided for now it doesn't make sense to do. There's a ton of projects I think are super interesting. I was just texting Saad about halal yield. Like there's basically extremely limited options. The main reason I quit, I was like, I'm not doing Sharia compliant leverage. I'm just going to do all cash on my real estate stuff. Is because of how painful and horrible it was to try to work with some of these lenders, the US providers, the big names. I don't want to attack them by their brands. They're atrocious. And one of my friends currently is trying to, he's saving up to buy a house and is trying to open up a high yield, account with multiple of these guys. And it's just not working. I think there's a massive opportunity just to build competent, well-run businesses serving Muslims. Because the right now, all these guys are printing money because they have inelastic demand. There's of course a user base, a customer base of Muslims who are Sharia compliant only, will only work with you guys, and so they kind of put up with this customer service, and it's a great opportunity to build next gen banking, next gen, consumer financial institutions, all this kind of stuff, B2B, B2C. It's just a matter of like who's going to go do it.
I think the soundbite there is a little extreme. There's a terrible soundbite, but I
I
think
mean, I
I
literally,
know what you're
I
trying to
walked
say
back
though.
myself.
It's an even worse sound.
It sounds horrific, but whenever I meet a Muslim founder who is smart, good to talk to and work with, I'm like, I will go out of my way to do whatever I can for you, because 90% plus of my interactions with this demographic is so bad that when I find the good ones, I want to do whatever I can for them.
So I think like that's what we could break down a little bit, right? Like I think that again, that soundbite's a little, it's a little tough because we shouldn't be saying that about our Muslim brothers. But what I think you're trying to say is, and hear me out, hear me out, hear me out. What I think you're trying to get at, like, and listen, man, like I'm on the operations side at Menzel, and I've had some conversations, right? I've had some conversations, and like from Muslim to Muslim, saying something that has been said to me is a tough pill to swallow at times. And treating, like you said, like you got a Muslim doctor that Muslims are specifically coming to that might be taking advantage. Like the
Yeah,
question becomes why. And um I think that for a long time, especially when we immigrate over to this side of the world, we get caught up in trying to make it, right? Like we get caught up in trying to build a new life here.
yeah.
And meanwhile,
I think it's actually mostly about that. I actually don't think it's an Islam issue. I think it's an immigrant cultural issue,
yeah, and
is
so
actually
like
what
if
I
I
think
was
it
to go
is.
on about it, right? Like it then becomes, we get so dialed into that that we're willing to sacrifice our values, our morals, our ethics in achieving that thing. And then it becomes a habit. It becomes, now psychologically, you're thinking that you have now been sort of wired to now believe it to be true, right?
This is just
That
how it
version
works.
to be true.
And here it's pretty bad, right? Because like the end goal is dunya, right? You're like sacrificing like
Yes.
akhirah for dunya. But let's talk about like people who go on Hajj and Umrah and some of the like really messed up stuff that you see, or even little things like pushing and shoving, right? You're like, what? But then when I'm like doing tawaf and someone's like elbowing me in the back, like well, I just try to remind myself like go watch a video of someone boarding like a economy class train in India, right? And then it all makes sense. Why
Yes.
people behave the way that they do.
Exactly. And so I think that a good reminder is that one, we shouldn't say that about our Muslims because it's deeper than that, and it's deeper than that.
I know,
It's
I
deeper
know.
than that. So I think I would adjust that a bit because it's deeper than that.
Yeah,
And I think the second part, like, and again, I mentioned this earlier, the conversations with my wife about it being two sided, right? Me being shoved, whatever the intention for the person was when they shoved me, if it was that they were unable to contain their anger or impatience, I will question them for it. If it's
yeah.
because back home, that's what they were, that's what they're used to,
That's how you just operate. Yeah,
then
that's just
that's between
normal.
that person and Allah, right? And so what's between Allah and I is how I react to it in that moment.
Yeah, can I focus or am I about to lose my
Yeah,
mind?
what are we about to do? And I think it goes even further. It goes further in the sense where, sure, in that moment, I forgave the person. But 10 days later, I fly home. Someone goes, Yo, Abdul Mateen, how was your Hajj? I'm like, yo, man, it was good. But there was this guy. He tested me. And if I do that, you know what I mean? Shaitan came in. This was like, yo, Abdul Mateen's in a spiritual state. I'm not going to attack him while he's doing his tawaf. I'm gonna wait 10 days when he gets home. So 10 days I get home and Shaitan hits me like, yo, tell him now. Talk about that experience now. You know what I mean? And so it becomes like, because our end goal is ultimately Jannah, like I gotta hold out until then. I gotta hold out on my excuses for these people until then. I gotta hold out, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
I gotta hold out on,
our fundamental problem as humans is short term versus long term.
yes, as
If we were
human,
truly long term, Akira only, that's the only thing that matters, etc., our behavior would be drastically different. But,
100%.
we're biologically wired for short term. I need food now, I need whatever it is now. And tolerating that and, trying to put the long term in perspective in short term behavior is very hard.
Yeah. I think so, man. I think so. And like I challenge you to adjust that statement a little bit. I do.
The problem is my week in week out interactions only further multiply the narrative.
Hey, but I challenge you. I challenge you.
I'm working on making it not true. Every now, I mean, I work with no interact with a ton of great Muslim guys in the finance, VC, private equity world for sure.
It's not
But
about
there's
whether or not the
yeah,
statement is true though. That's not what it's about. It's about what it is that, like, what excuses and what ways that you find to
Yeah.
not make that statement, essentially.
So here's an interesting flipping of it, right? So of course, like it is not good to have a bad opinion of Muslims, listen to done, etc. Yada yada yada. Like for sure. How do you balance that with like the business world, right? So a friend of mine wants to open a high yield account, wants to save money in a low risk way for his home mortgage. Do I go be like, yeah, go use like these guys? When my real opinion is these guys terrible. Good luck working with these guys.
Yeah. I think I listen, I understand that problem because, well, we're out here trying to solve it. But I think my response to that person would be the truth. It wouldn't be the judgment, it would be the truth, right? Like it would be, hey, there's this product that exists, right? It's it it checks all your boxes from this perspective based on experience. This is what I've experienced or what someone else has experienced that I've heard of. So it might be challenging. However, you know what I mean? Like you're good to make that decision, right? Like if it's a grown adult that you respect, they're good to make that decision. You know what I mean? And so what if this team has increased their customer support, has gotten a round of funding that has allowed them to better their technology? I don't know, man. It could be a million things,
Yeah.
right? So I would just base it off the truth. You know what I mean? Without any judgment. Even if we're not getting into the whole like give this person 70 excuses. Let's not even go there because we're talking about business, staying
Yeah,
busy.
this is business. This is like
You know what I
I'm
mean?
not
And
gonna
so in
use
that
that
case, I'll keep it
excuses.
the truth.
I'm taking my business elsewhere.
I'd keep it the truth, you know what I mean? And I challenge you. I think like it's not even about like solving that right now. I just think it's about challenging each other to be better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was
But I
hilarious.
digress.
With that one specific provider, I ended up like talking to like the guy's manager and like complaining. So I was like, dude, this is I don't know how you guys run a business.
Yeah, I think like balancing faith and finance mixed with like our human emotions and who we are as humans is like the challenge that we're going to be facing till, the day of judgment. But so I just challenge each other to little by little, you know what I mean? Little by little. But alhamdulillah, man, I appreciate you joining us. I think there was a lot of good advice on there, especially when it comes to how to sort of approach the day to day with some of those principles, some of those thoughts, and a good conversation around that. But I think one thing, if you want to share with the audience, if you want to share with the world, is sort of where they can find you, or if you have any events or publishing things coming up, anything of that sort, following you on LinkedIn, etc. If you want to share that with them before we end off, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
I mean, I'd say my closing advice is to do the work, trust in your creator, and surrender the outcome. Like everything works out exactly the way it's supposed to, and it'll be fine whether now or after we die. It's going to be okay. Happy to connect with anyone in the venture startup world, anyone interested in residential real estate investing, etc. Pretty easy to find. You can find me on LinkedIn. My email is literally just my name at mujtaba.wani@gmail or mujtaba@gsv.com for GSV related stuff. Yeah.
Amazing, man. Jazakallah khair and assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.